Hey y'all, welcome to Sandy's Library. I'm Sandy, and in this video we're going to get back to my great-grandparents, Willie Williams and Lizzie Fuller. These are old family tales about my grandmother's people, so if you need visuals, there are links posted in the description outlining both of my grandparents' family trees. So, it's been a while since we talked specifically about Willie and Lizzie's life together. But based on the last few videos, we can see that Willie and Lizzie's life was a lot more complicated than our half-cousin lets on in his manuscript. We know from multiple family tales that they were frequently on the move and mostly between Arkansas and Louisiana because Willie didn't care for Mississippi. Our half-cousin states that on one of the Williams family moves from Arkansas to Louisiana, they rented a one-room log cabin from the Grant family. Again, I wish our half-cousin had been concerned about dates, but nevertheless, here we are. So, before we move on with his story, let's try to put a time frame with it. Based on church records that placed them in Jacksonville, Arkansas in 1902, and the fact that Aunt Sally was born in October of 1903, we can assume this move happened in late 1902 or early 1903. So anyway, the cabin that the Williams family rented was said to have been located along the southwestern border of Ouachita Parish at the intersection of Will Brown Road and Highway 34. This area was rural and known as Guyton. The cabin stood in a field and included a side room which served as a kitchen and a dining room. It's said that Willie made his own version of bunk beds by attaching wooden planks to the walls where he placed mattresses on each one so the kids all had their own beds to sleep in. Our half-cousin reports that while living here, Lizzie gave birth to her 9th child, Sally Ann, born on October 14th, 1903. Sally was delivered by Dr. Hood of Eris. He became the Williamses' family doctor after that. About a year after Sally's birth, Willie would buy some land, and after that, the Grant cabin became known as the Cotton Club. Willie would make his final move after purchasing 90 acres in southwest Ouachita Parish from Ben and Mary Carpenter on November 18, 1904. The price was $500. Willie paid the Carpenters $125 up front and signed 3 promissory notes for the same amount due and payable on October 20th for the next 3 years. It's worth noting that Willie obviously paid the notes off early, as the deed was transferred to him in 1906, per Ouachita Parish records. Another interesting tidbit, y'all, is that the carpenter's son, Will, would one day marry Willie's daughter, Sally. I remember Aunt Sally very well, and I have very fond memories of her too. So, back to Willie's newly purchased land where he would spend the rest of his life. And to put this in a little bit of perspective, in 1906, when Willie paid off his land, he turned 37 years old. Near the front of the family cemetery's present-day location stood a small log cabin made of pine logs. The family cleaned up the cabin and moved in, while Willie built a house in front of the cabin for the family. According to the old family tales, Willie built a large house with a fireplace made of sticks and clay. Once the house was completed, the old log cabin was used as the kitchen and dining room. Willie connected the new house and the log cabin with a wall-less roofed breezeway, which the family called the wide planks, because the walkway had a wooden plank floor. It's said that Marion Fuller, Willie's father-in-law, taught him how to rivet boards to make shingles out of cedar or cypress trees with a device called a froe. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it. It's spelled F-R-O-E. But nevertheless, with this device, it's said that Willie made enough shingles to cover not only the new house, but the old cabin too, which was now serving as their kitchen and dining rooms. My grandmother and her siblings all agreed if it was raining and the wind was blowing, you'd have to make a run for the kitchen. Otherwise, you'd get wet. The house, according to my grandmother and her sisters, was Lizzie's house. They said Willie built it according to her specifications. And y'all, this drawing back here in the center stage, this is a likeness of the house that was drawn for me by my niece Ashley. She's very gifted. But anyway, Aunt Allie is the only one of Lizzie's surviving children that was born in the house. Lizzie's 10th child, Allie Keturah, was born on March 31st, 1906. She was named after Willie's sister, Allie, and her paternal grandmother, Keturah Graham. Aunt Allie, like Aunt Sally, was delivered by Dr. Hood of Eris. There seems to be little mention in our half-cousin's manuscript about the fact that Aunt Allie hated the name Keturah. So much so, in fact, that by the time I came along, she was calling herself Allie K, and that's K-A-Y. I always heard that she was named after her aunt and her grandmother. I just figured her name was Kay when I was a kid. And no, I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's Willie's grandmother, I think. Let's see. Keturah Graham is Julia Wheat. So it's Julia's mother is here we're talking about that she was named after. So she was named after Willie's sister, Allie, and Julia, Willie's mother's mother, Keturah Graham. Yeah, okay. So, anyway, but I always heard that, so I figured that Julia's mother's name was Kay, right? That's what I always thought. But now I figure that by the time I came along, it was just easier for my grandmother and her siblings to simply let Aunt Allie pretend her middle name was Kay. In December of 1907, Lizzie's brother John Fuller and his wife Gertrude, who owned 50 acres across the road, sold their property to Willie and Lizzie. The Fullers had bought their property around the same time that Willie and Lizzie had bought theirs, and they lived there for about 3 years, during which time they built a house. It's said that Willie allowed several families to live in the Fuller home, each for a few weeks at a time until they found their own places. Willie received many offers on the Fuller place, but he never sold it. After the house sat vacant for a few years, Willie began to use it to store barrels of peanuts, corn, and farming supplies. No one's really sure what happened to the old Fuller place. Some say it fell into disrepair, and others say it was torn down. Others claim it was a fire that destroyed it. The only thing that we know for sure is that the house was no longer standing in the 1920s. So, it's reported that Willie borrowed on his land a couple of times to get money to plant crops. It's also said that he nearly lost his land once as he struggled to repay the loan by the due date. Once he did repay his debt, it's said that he declared, "I almost lost my farm. I'll never do that again, even if I starve to death." It's also worth noting, y'all, that Willie never ever really came close to starving to death. By all accounts, he provided a decent living for his family. Some of Willie's descendants like to pretend that Willie didn't touch alcohol, but stories from his children throughout the years would suggest otherwise. He also dipped snuff, and he loved to dance, which is something that my fellow cousins, well, some of them anyway, deem a sin due to their religious convictions. So, they've tried to sanitize Willie's life. But I'm here to give you the unadulterated truth, and there's a lot to be told about this very colorful character. It's said that during the early years of Willie and Lizzie's marriage that he loved to dance, and they attended all the local dance parties. Willie apparently loved this activity so much that even when Lizzie was too pregnant to tag along, he would simply go without her. It's reported that this behavior made Lizzie incredibly unhappy. I can't say that I blame her for that. And y'all know, I wonder if actions like this weighed heavy on his mind after she died. Willie and Lizzie's oldest child, Julia Bell, frequently told the following story. Every once in a while, her father liked to take a nip of liquor. She recalled once when her mother was visibly pregnant and Willie got her to take a nip with him. Lizzie got so intoxicated that she lost her footing and nearly fell off the porch. Aunt Julie Bell said that, even though she was a child at the time, she did not approve of their behavior. She said it upset her so that she ended up scolding her parents, and severely for it too, she said. But then she would chuckle and say, "And Papa just laughed at me." The children said that Willie absolutely loved fish, and he could eat it faster than anyone they knew. Aunt Julie Bell said that when he ate fish, he was basically shoving it in one side of his mouth while pulling the bones out the other, and all simultaneously too. Both my grandmother, Viola, and her sister Julie Bell said the family would get together with their other relatives and go camping and fishing along creek and river banks in the area. They both recalled holding fish fries at their campsite. I suspect one of those places was off Phillips on 34, just before the paper mill in West Monroe. I recall as a very small child in the early 60s going there all the time to go fishing. And y'all, by that time, there was no need for camping out then, as vehicles had been readily available for decades. And we had one, a truck. Never had a fish fry on the creek banks, though. Those were always held at the church. And let me just remind y'all, all the church members were pretty much related. Okay, so it's about that time in my great-grandparents' story where we come to the part that's the hardest for me to tell. The death of my great-grandmother, Lizzie Fuller Williams. But that story needs its own video. So, next up, Lizzie's death. So, until next time, later, Gators.